Hello, good afternoon, guys. My name is Afulai Maruf. Our topic today is how organization culture and HR practice shape employee burnout. So I'll be taking the introduction part. In many workspace today, employee deals with high workload, long hour, and constant pressure to perform. This often leads to burnout, which is a state of emotion, exhaustion and reduced motivation. Burnout usually happen when job demands are too high and support or resources employee needs are not enough. Organizational culture also, plays a big role. A supportive culture and um, encouraging communication and appreciation can protect employee from stress, but high pressure culture that normalize overworking can make burnout much worse. HR practice like management workload of offering well-being support can of oh sorry well-being support and training leaders can help, but only if the organization culture truly supports the employee well-being. So the literature review part shows the main thing. Firstly, burnout is caused by high demand and low resources. Things like heavy workload, little control, and limited support. Secondly, organization culture shape how employee experience stress, and supportive culture reduce burnout, while competitive or demanding culture increase in it. And then thirdly, the HR practice can reduce burnout, but only when they match the culture. If the culture is not supportive, HR policy does not work as well. And then um overall, the literature agree that burnout comes from the combination of jobs demand, culture, and HR practice working together. So I'll be passing the mic to Miriam.
Hi, this is Mariam Azram, and my part basically focuses on the key gaps in the existing research. So, first, there's a lack of qualitative insight. We know a lot about burnout as a concept, but we know far less about how employees actually experience burnout in their day to day working lives. Second, there is a poor understanding of how culture norms shape burnout. For example, expectations around long hours or silence about stress often go unnoticed in the research. Third, there are very few integrated studies that look at the culture, HR practices, and burnout together. Most studies treat these areas separately. Then there is a limited research differences between the HR policy and what employees actually experience in the practice. Finally, there are contradictions in many organizations. HR departments promote well being on paper, but the culture can still encourage overwork. This tension is under research. Then let's just move towards the research questions. These gaps basically lead to these research questions. How do employees experience burnout within their organizational culture? Number two is how do employees perceive alignment or misalignment between HR practices and that culture? How do cultures and HR practices interact to influence burnout? Together, these questions allow the study to move beyond simply identifying how the burnout instead explore the culture and HR mechanisms that produces it. They guide the research toward understanding not just what employees experience, but those experiences occur within the organizations. Then we have a research aim. The aim of this study is to develop a deep qualitative understanding of how these organizational culture and HR practices shape, reinforce, or alleviate employees' experience of burnout in order to identify meaningful opportunities for organizational improvement. Then, moving forward towards the research objectives. So, from this aim, we develop four key objectives. One is to examine employees' lived experiences of burnout. Number two is to analyze how cultural norms influence stress and well-being. And number three is to explore alignment or misalignment between HR practices and everyday culture. Then we have to investigate how culture and HR practices interact to influence burnout. And finally, to provide evidence based recommendations for the HR strategies. Because, as I have mentioned earlier, that the HR practices and the strategies, they are being they're not being practiced, they're just the policies that are mentioned in the HR manual, but they're not fully practice. So that's it from my part. Let's just move towards Sapna. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Hi, I am Sapna Paudel, and moving on to the methodology part of our research. In this section, the focus is on how the study was designed, the philosophical stance behind it, the approach taken, and the methods used to explore burnout and organizational culture. The study uses a qualitative exploratory multi-method methodology because burnout and organizational culture involve personal feelings and experiences that numbers cannot fully capture. This approach helps collect real stories and emotions while the exploratory design allows new insights to emerge naturally. Using multiple quantitative methods also keeps the research systematic, ethical, and better able to explain how culture and HR practices influence burnout. Being on this foundation, the next part considers the philosophical position that guides the study. The research is based on an interpretivist philosophy which focuses on how people make sense of their own experiences. This is suitable because burnout, workplace pressure, support, and culture differ for every individual and cannot be fully explained by numbers. Using an interpretivist lens allows the study to explore the emotional, psychological, and social sides of burnout and understand how employers interpret their work environment and cultural norms. After establishing the philosophy, the study then adopts a research approach that supports the overall aim and objectives. The study uses an inductive research approach where the themes and ideas are developed from the data instead of applying pre existing theories. This is appropriate because there is limited qualitative work connecting organizational culture, HR practices, and burnout in a single framework. The inductive approach allows natural pattern to emerge from what participants shares, leading to findings that are grounded in real experiences. This approach adds flexibility, depth, and originality to the research. With the approach established, the final part of this section explains the specific method used to collect the data. The study uses a qualitative exploratory multi-method methodology because burnout and organizational culture are shaped by personal experiences that numbers cannot fully capture. This approach helps gather real stories, emotions, and workplace interactions. Mm, while the exploratory design allows new insights to emerge naturally. Overall, the methodology keeps the research systematic and ethical, leading to a deeper understanding of how culture and HR practices influence burnout. This overall methodology supports a deep, well rounded exploration of how organizational culture and HR practices influence burnout, providing both personal and collective perspective. Now, the remaining part is up to Sanjida. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sajida Muni. I will be presenting about data collection. So let me break down how we are actually gathering the data. We are using purposive sampling, which basically means we are speaking to people who genuinely have experiences with burnout, employees, managers, and HR practitioners. That gives us right kind of insight, not just random opinions. For the methods, we are using semi structured interviews and focus groups. Interviews let people open up about personal experiences, things like pressure, exhaustion, or how supported they feel. Focus groups help us see the shared cultural patterns inside the workplace, how people talk about expectations, norms, and day to day realities. All sessions will be recorded, transcribed, and fully anonymized. Everything is stored securely under GDPR, so we get rich, honest data while protecting everyone's involved. Moving to the ethical considerations, because burnout can be sensitive. We are handling ethics carefully. Everyone is given informed consent, meaning they know exactly what the study is about before taking part. Participation is completely voluntary and they can walk away anytime with no consequences. We protect confidentiality and anonymity through pseudonyms and secure data handling. We are also mindful that talking about burnout can bring up uncomfortable emotions, so the researcher will approach every interview with sensitivity and give participants space if they need it. And of course, the whole study follows GDPR and universities' ethical guidelines. The point is simple. We want good data, but not at the cost of anyone's well being. Moving to the justifications of the methodology, here is the thing: burnout and the organizational culture are not numbers, they are lived experiences. That is why qualitative interpretivist inductive approach is the best fit. We choose this methodology because numbers alone cannot explain burnout. People experience it differently depending on their culture, their manager, and how HR works in their organization. A qualitative interpretivist approach lets us hear those experiences in people's own words instead of forcing them into fixed survey boxes. The inductive approach also makes sense here because we don't want to assume we already know the patterns. We want the themes to come directly from what participants saying. Semi-structured interviews gives us personal depth, while focus group reveals shared cultural norms that individual might not mention their own. Using both help us see the full picture. Finally, thematic analysis is the best way to organize these insights into clear patterns without losing the meaning behind people's stories. Overall, the methodology fits the research question, respects the complexity of burnout, and gives us in evidence that actually reflects real workplace experiences. Put simply, this methodology doesn't tell us what is happening. It helps us understand why it is happening and how culture and HR practices shape burnout in the real world. Coming to the conclusion, to wrap up, burnout isn't just about workload, it is deeply connected to the culture employees work in and HR practices that are meant to support them. Quantitative studies have given us numbers, but they have missed the lived realities behind the numbers. Our qualitative interpretivist approach fills that gap. By listening to people directly, we get a much clearer picture of how culture and HR interact, what actually contribute to burnout. Thank you so much. That is all from us.